Today, we're going to be going over our 5 best teams in the NFC. And I'm pretty sure we've got very different lists. Let's just get right into it with an honorable mention. For me, the 6th best team standing on the outside looking in is the Dallas Cowboys. And oh yeah, they had a terrible draft. They had a terrible free agency. They've still got a good quarterback. They've still got a great offensive line. They still got CeeDee Lamb. They still got high-end talent on that defense. The Cowboys are going to be a playoff team unless the wheels really start falling off and Dak gets hurt. But we're not going to go out of our way to predict unlikely injuries. So, Cowboys sitting at number 6 for me. Good team, just not quite able to get into the top 5.
I applaud you for wanting to, make Cowboys fans feel better about themselves because in all reality, they're not a Super Bowl contender. They'll be a very good team this season. I don't think that is in question. They still have a solid roster. I don't know if I'd quite put them above the Eagles, but when you look at how somewhat rough the rest of the NFC is, especially at the bottom of some divisions, they're still a good team. You want to call them 6th, 7th best team? I think they'll make the playoffs, but
I don't like that Eagles comics. I'm making an inference about that. We'll get into the Eagles later. At number 5, I've got the Atlanta Falcons. And people are not seeing the forest for the trees on this one. They're seeing the Michael Penix at 8th overall pick and thinking, oh, terrible offseason, they're in trouble. What are the 2 most important parts of a football team? The 2 most important individuals to a football team's success are the quarterback and the head coach. The Falcons massively upgraded at both. I know Reed Morris didn't have a great stint with the Buccaneers when he was in charge. He's still an upgrade over Arthur Smith. Kirk Cousins, massive upgrade over Desmond Ridder. I beat the drum for Desmond, gave him the benefit of the doubt, but the combination of Smith and his own poor play really doomed him last year. They have a good quarterback, they've got a great offensive line, they've got a great set of weapons, and that of their first 4 picks in this year's draft, they addressed the defensive line. They didn't use that 8th overall pick on him, but they still went out and built up their D-line in the first 4 rounds of the draft. They are going to be a bit better defensively, and they are going to be much better offensively, which gets them to, I'd say, 11-12 wins, making them one of the 5 best teams in the NFC for me. They also play the last place schedule, worst schedule in football, which will do them a lot of favors.
Well, if we're going strictly based off the record they might have at the end of the season because they play in one of the weaker divisions in the NFL, yeah, I could maybe get on board with that. But when we take a look at the Falcons, having Kirk, and they'll certainly be better than last season because Desmond Ridder was not a good quarterback, and whether it's Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix has to step in to start, those are upgrades over Desmond Ridder. So they're going to be a better team. They're going to win more games despite the odd decision to draft Michael Penix. So that is all true. But when you take a look at some of the other teams in the NFC, and we're labeling it best, not necessarily best record and who's going to win each division in the NFC, I don't think they're the best team because they have a brand new head coach. They have a quarterback coming off of an ACL injury. Achilles injury. And there's teams that are more established that I think have momentum coming from last year. They have continuity at the head coach position. They either have a quarterback in year 2 looking to get better, and that's who my number 5 ranked team is. The Green Bay Packers, they made massive strides last season in the first year of Jordan Love, who got better with each week, played very well in the playoffs. Their wide receiver core is extremely young. Between Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, all their receivers are under the age of 25, and they have 2 very good young tight ends. And they just added Josh Jacobs and added Marshawn Lloyd in the draft. So on the offensive side of the ball, they have a solid offensive line. They have the weapons with a quarterback in year 2. Well, it's not really even year 2 considering he sat for 3 seasons.
It's year 5. Let's be real about this here. This is not some rookie quarterback who's going to take some massive leap from year 1 to year 2. What we've seen of Jordan Love is about what we're going to get.
And he was very, very, very good. Borderline elite at the end of last season. And I think with building more continuity with those receivers, getting better on the defensive side of the ball or healthier on the defensive side of the ball, they are going to be one of the 5 best teams in the NFC, contend for the AFC North, which
NFC North.
I am having all the misspeaks this podcast so far. But with what we've said about the NFC North, that is the most loaded division in football between the Packers, Vikings, Bears, Lions. All those teams I think could finish with could finish above 500, but I think the Packers are very good.
Well, let's talk about the NFC North here, because my number 4 team is the second best team in the NFC North. I will not be specifying who it is because I don't know who it's going to be. But realistically, there are 3 teams in the NFC North fighting for that number 2 spot. You just went over the Packers. I'm not as high on Jordan Love as you are. I think he's more likely to regress than advance going into his 5th year, second as a starter. The defense, they drafted Quay Walker clones. The first round pick from last year, Lucas Van Ness, isn't really working out. I don't know if that side of the ball is going to be particularly special. Maybe the young receivers develop more. Maybe things keep looking good. Maybe they build on. But I think they're going to stay right around where they were last season. Divisional round team at best. Looking at the Bears, solid offensive line, best wide receiver trio in the division. Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. A lot of people's wide receiver 1 in Rome Odunze. Keenan Allen, 1,200 yards last year. DJ Moore, 1,300 yards last year, with Tyson Bagent and Justin Fields throwing him the ball. Caleb Williams should be an upgrade. And to whom much is given, which Caleb Williams has been given more than any first overall draft pick in history, much is expected. It is realistic to expect this team to win 10 plus games, to compete for a wild card spot, to maybe even challenge the top team for the division. Looking over at the Vikings, this is where the most uncertainty is. We don't know what their quarterback position is. Outside of the quarterback position, they might be the best team in the division. Best wide receiver, very solid wide receiver 2, very solid tight end, great tackle pair, and a Brian Flores defense, which was supposed to be the worst defense in football last year, looked average and got massively upgraded through the draft and through free agency. That side of the ball is probably going to be top 10, maybe even top 5 next year with Flores' influence. If they can figure out the quarterback position, if Sam Darnold works for whatever reason, if J.J. McCarthy gets a start in the first month of the year and is NFL ready, can target the middle of the field like I know he can, we are going to see a team win 10, 11, 12 games. All this is to say these 3 teams are all neck and neck. Maybe you prefer one over the other due to the uncertainty of the rookie quarterbacks. That's fine. But one of these 3 teams is clearly at this 4 spot for me.
So just so I'm clear, are all of these NFC North teams 4, 3, and 2 for you? Or is it
they're all.
You think one of them's going to be good out of the 3, and that one is going to be the 4th best team in the NFC?
Realistically, the Packers, I think we're going to see 10, 11 wins from that. That might be the 4th best team in the NFC. The NFC might stink. Of the Bears and the Vikings, the rookie quarterbacks, one of those 2 is going to have a solid season. They might not have a solid enough season to get them up to that win mark. They might come in and have a solid season towards the back half once they've already
So
lost.
who's
enough.
your 4th rank? Who's your
second
4th
best
best
team
team
in the NFC? Second best team in the NFC North.
So you're putting 3 teams.
No, I'm putting the second best team in the NFC North. You can infer which one of those it is based off my description.
He's unwilling to put his prediction out there. That's
I put my
soft.
prediction. The second best team in the NFC North is going to be here.
Whatever that take was, I don't even know what I'm exactly sure what to respond
talk about
to.
your geriatric quarterback and your much worse defense now.
My 4th best team is the Los Angeles Rams. I was a big believer of the Rams in the playoffs last season and how they ended last year, 7-1 in the regular season, and then the offseason, they have only gotten better. I love what they did in the draft. Well, with Aaron Donald leaving.
With the exception of the best defensive player in football retiring. Aside from that one small issue, they've gotten better. Sure, man.
They've addressed several weaknesses, or players have gotten healthier than they were last year. I mean, they're doing their best to replace Aaron Donald leaving through Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk. They dealt with some running back injuries last year in Kyren Williams. They now have Blake Corum behind him to form what I think is going to be a dynamic duo. And Cooper Kupp, he battled with injury all season long last year, so he's going to be healthier. Hopefully, off-season still has to happen. Training camp still has to happen. All of that permitting. Him and Puka Nacua in year 2, I think, are going to be more complementary to one another. Matthew Stafford back there slinging the rock with how they finished last year and how we kind of have seen their running game evolve compared to previous seasons and the backfield they have. I think they're going to be the 4th best team in football. They may contend for the NFC West this season.
You could put Derrick Henry behind that Rams offensive line. I would question if he cracks 1,000 yards. That is an issue for him. That issue goes hand in hand with my real issue, though. Matthew Stafford is old. He's injury prone. He will battle through injuries. We've seen him do it his entire career, but do you really want a banged up Matthew Stafford leading your team? Do you really want an old Cooper Kupp who is also probably going to be dealing with something halfway through the year? leading your team, playing in a division with the 49ers, with the Seahawks, who I'm not a huge fan, but admittedly can steal games with how good their offense is, with how talented their receivers are. And most importantly, they have lost the most disruptive player in football off their defense. Maybe you want to put Myles Garrett or TJ Watt in that conversation. Certainly the most disruptive interior D lineman. And replacing him with Verse, I don't think that's a comparable replacement. Of the 3 high-end edge rushers in this year's draft, Verse was by far the worst. I much prefer Latu, even with his injury concerns. I much prefer Dallas Turner. I don't know if this move is really what the Rams think it is. I get they also upgrade other parts of their D-line the draft out of Florida State, but still, it is going to be a clear regression to a defense which was already being held together by strings and tape. That side of the ball is going to be worse. Offensively, the injury risk is just too high with how bad that O-line is. I can't put the Rams on my list. I'm not a believer in the Rams this year.
I don't think the offensive line is that bad, and I do agree it's impossible to replace Aaron Donald, but I think the depth they added at the defensive line, along with some young players who played well last season, you hope they just improve this year. I believe in the Rams.
You believe in the Rams? I believe in the Eagles. They're my number 3 team in the NFC. And the issues the Eagles faced last year were twofold. One, both new coordinators they hired were absolutely horrible. We're not ready for the job of coordinator, led high school level defenses and offenses, and secondly, they had real issues in their secondary. And they went out and they addressed both those issues. Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio are experienced. Maybe you don't want them as your head coach. I understand not being excited about that, but they can lead an offense and they can lead a defense. And the secondary, they massively upgraded. Obviously getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson, nice little depth piece, but you get Quinyon Mitchell. When you get Cooper DeJean, who are 2 of the 3 best cornerbacks in this year's draft, you say, okay, we're going to roll with them. I have a lot more faith in that unit now than I did last year. I don't think it's going to be as bad through the air as it was previously. The bleeding has been stopped somewhat. Defensively, losing Fletcher Cox hurts, but you have to have faith in Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis at some point. Those guys, mainly Jordan Davis, was a developmental piece who we have seen get better as time goes on. Jalen Carter was a beast in the first half of last season, but I think defensive shortcomings in the secondary and from the coordinators slowed him down. The interior of that D-line is going to be fine. They drafted Cam Jurgensen to replace Jason Kelce a few years ago. It just took Kelce a few years longer than expected to head out the door. Jurgensen will be fine starting at center. He's going to be able to run the tush push all right. This offense and this defense are going to be much better than last season. You're going to say, oh, Sirianni lost the locker room. I don't really think he did. I think his coordinators just gave up the ghost, so to speak, down the stretch. They cannot be as bad as they were in the final 6 weeks in the playoffs of 2023. It just can't happen again. I refuse to believe a team this talented is going to be that woeful.
I'll address the Eagles in a second, but my 3rd best team in the NFC is the San Francisco 49ers. And I do not like their fan base. I would love to push them further down the list just because of how much I hate their fan base. And some people may view this placement as hate. I'm sure Isaiah does because he probably has a much higher on his list. But when
much higher. There are 3 spots left.
But when I am ranking my top 3 teams in the NFC, it feels like I am splitting hairs a little bit with how good each team is going to be. And when I look at the 49ers and what they did in the draft, what they did in the offseason, they lost Chase Young, they lost Arik Armstead, and they did add Leonard Floyd to be a pass rusher to kind of replace Chase Young off the edge. But I am just not as big of a believer in that. And when they used a 1st-round pick on Ricky Pearsall instead of a different position, and they didn't really address offensive line to a significant degree, I mean, how long are they going to rely on Trent Williams to be their left tackle and the rest of the offensive line? We heard it from 49ers fans all last offseason that that's the reason Brock Purdy struggled in some games. It has led me to place him at 3 instead of 2 or 1. Ultimately, I love Kyle Shanahan. They have a new defensive coordinator who maybe he'll be better than last year in some of those games where the defense floundered, but they're the 3rd best team in the NFC
what
for me.
offensive lineman did you want them to get with that Pearsall pick? That is so deep in the draft. All the really high-end tackles were gone. Did you want them to go reach and draft the dude the Lions got in the 4th round who played rugby his entire life before now? Like, what is the pick here? Maybe JPJ, but still center wasn't the biggest issue on that 49ers O-line. I have no issue with the Pearsall pick. I'll talk about them in a second. What do you think of the Eagles? Why do you have them as 2?
Well, the Eagles are my second best team. And like I said, splitting hairs between them, the 49ers, and my first ranked team, all of them are neck and neck right now for me. But the reason I have them in 2 instead of the 49ers at 2 is because all of the moves they made in the offseason, from a roster perspective, they got better basically everywhere. They added Kevin Byard last year in an attempt to make their secondary better. They realized that mistake, signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Their secondary was horrible in general, added 2 DBs in their first and second round that were very good prospects to that secondary. They lost DeAndre Swift, added Saquon Barkley, got better at running back. They extended A.J. Brown in the offseason. So from a roster perspective, the Eagles only got better, and they're a team that just 2 seasons ago went to the Super Bowl. The only thing where I am raising an eyebrow with their next season and how they're going to perform is Nick Sirianni. Did they hire the right coordinators? Because the coordinators last year were awful. Is Kellen Moore going to get that Eagles offense back to where it needs to be? Is Vic Fangio going to get that defense back where it needs to be? That is why I don't have them at 1, but the moves they made in the offseason to address their roster is why I have them over the 49ers.
You questioned Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore as a head coach hire. They could run offenses and defenses. I don't understand why you're skeptical about that. Also, the addition of Saquon Barkley after moving off of Swift cannot be overstated. DeAndre Swift, very athletically gifted, high-level draft pick, will probably find success in Chicago. Struggled to find where the hole was. He couldn't put it in, so to speak. Saquon Barkley, equally athletic, maybe even more athletic, and can recognize those holes, has much better vision, has patience, has better explosion. He is such an upgrade at the running back position. The only issue you can run into is maybe he gets hurt, but he's not playing on that crappy MetLife turf anymore, and he is now behind one of the best offensive lines in football, going from where he is now, comparing that to the Giants, the worst O-line in football by many metrics. It's just night and day. That alone, like, they could have me playing quarterback for him, and I believe they had a top 15 offense, just from how well they could run the ball.
They also lost Hassan Reddick, so you hope Nolan Smith and some of those younger pieces, they also added Bryce Huff, are able to kind of replace what has been very good production from the edge rusher position. And I
will jump in on that. I don't view the Hassan Reddick loss as that big of a deal, because people were making fun of the Eagles' run defense all last season. It's because they sold their soul and were playing Hassan Reddick more downs than he really should have. Hassan Reddick's a great pass rusher, but he cannot defend the run at all. He's a watered-down version of Micah Parsons in that way. He just couldn't stop the run. If they want to be a legitimate NFL defense, they cannot have an area of weakness on the edge in Hassan Reddick.
You're getting mad at me or annoyed with my analysis of that's the only thing giving me doubt for the Eagles. I don't think the coaching situation specifically, because when you look at their roster, I don't think there's any argument that they don't have the most complete roster in the NFL, assuming that the draft picks they made are that significant of an addition to their secondary in combination with getting Gardner-Johnson in the offseason as well.
You can say most complete. At the end of the day, their offenses who are more complete and better than them. I'm going to get into my number 1 pick to say, most complete. Bit of name watching. Let's talk about the 49ers, though, since you have them at number 3. Well, am I going to have them much higher rated?
Do you have them at 2?
Yeah, I have them at 2. I'm going to have them as my -4 pick. Much higher rated. Yeah, you look at the 49ers. They lost Eric Armstead. They lost Chase Young. They bring in Leonard Floyd. They bring in Jordan Elliott. They bring in a gentleman whose name I cannot pronounce from the Panthers. They lose Ray McLeod. They get Ricky Pearsall. They got better. I don't think they got much better. They may have stayed the same, but they certainly didn't get worse. This isn't some max exodus of talent you normally see from a team who just went to the Super Bowl. They will be just fine next year. The only reason I have them at 2 is because the team who was within 1 score of them in the NFC Championship game, who choked a little bit, went out and got much better. And after that championship game, Dan Campbell cried and said, this may be our one shot. It wasn't. The Lions are going back to the NFC Championship game at bare minimum, and I think this is the year they finally go to the Super Bowl. They are the best team in the NFC, and I really don't think it is particularly close. You look at their offensive line. The one line in the league which is better than the Eagles. Dominant in pass protection and run blocking. You cannot compare. Penei Sewell is the best tackle in football. He has exceeded Trent Williams in his production. He just plays on that right side. Defensively, they have Aiden Hutchinson. They will have James Houston back and healthy for an entire season. And they have one of the premier run-stopping defensive tackles in football in DJ Reader. Pass rush, a little bit questionable still, but I do believe the pass rush will be bolstered by the fact they went out and upgraded their secondary. We talked about the Eagles having a clear area of weakness there last season. It was worse for the Lions. Every team playing the Lions became an air raid offense. Nick Mullins threw for 400 yards and 390 yards against this Lions defense in 2 different games. It was bad. They go out there, they get Terrion Arnold, best defensive back in the draft, capable of being a physical #1 quarterback. Will go up against any receiver and find success unless you stick him on Tyreek Hill or something, which, hey, who can guard Tyreek Hill one-on-one? They go out, they get people to fill in holes in the secondary. They lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson, big whoop. They got Carlton Davis. They got Amik Robbins, who I'm probably missaying the name of. They are much better at that side of the ball. Offensively, Jared Goff performed like the best quarterback in the NFC North last season. They've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, deservedly the highest paid wide receiver in football. They've got a great running attack. Jahmyr Gibbs is only going to get better. He's only going to see his touches increase going into year 2. This offense is going to be unstoppable, and with a halfway decent defense, which I truly believe they have now, they're going to the Super Bowl.
Well, real quick, before I address what was your tiebreaker for the 49ers and Eagles? Why did you
Simple. The Eagles were not a team who played in the NFC Championship game last year, and the 49ers were. Which you say, oh, that's stupid. They've got better coaching. I know I just defended Sirianni. He's no Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan dominates in conference play. And let's be frank about this. They're more talented offensively than the Eagles. I would rather have the 49ers wide receivers and running back situation and tight end situation than the Eagles.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear, and we don't need to drone on about that. I just want to know why you had the 49ers above the Eagles. And we actually agree for once on something. The Detroit Lions, they're the best team in the NFC. You mentioned a lot of the additions on defense. They addressed the secondary with Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw in the second round. They got better at the defensive back position. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you mentioned it, their offensive line. They might have the best tight end in the NFL. They have a top 5 receiver in the NFL in Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's now getting paid like that, like he deserves. And they have an electric backfield with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery complementing each other with Jared Goff playing at a high level. So their offense, they're going to be a top 5 offense in the NFL like they were each of the last 2 seasons. And I agree with you. They got DJ Reader. They added Marcus Davenport, who hasn't had a great career.
Who hasn't been healthy. Marcus Davenport, when he's on the field, is great. He just can't stay healthy.
Well, he's certainly a good rotational pass rusher at that. And with the one loss they had on their offensive line in Jonah Jackson, they addressed with a 1-year, I think it's a 1-year deal, with Kevin Zeitler to step in and keep that offensive line where it needs to be. So I'm a big believer in what we saw from the Lions at the end of last season in the playoffs. Almost were in the Super Bowl with their game against the 49ers. And I think if everything breaks the right way, the defense has gotten better as far as points allowed per game every year under Dan Campbell, the Lions are going to be the best team in the NFC.
They're going to be the best team in football. I think if you put them up against the Chiefs, it's not going to go too well for Kansas City. Ravens may be a different outcome, but we shall wait and see. Then again, though, one of those second best teams in the NFC North might surprise you a little bit. You never know what a rookie quarterback's going to do with a corked up arm and a snazzy defense. Those were our 5 best teams in the NFC. Let us know who we missed in the comments below. Are we greatly underrating the NFC South? Are we being disrespectful to the Seahawks? Who did we leave out? And will Tristan edit out all my stutters in this final segment?
And thank you for all of the support. We've had 300 views on our last episode and each of the videos before that, 800 and over 1,000. Thank you. Like the video, subscribe. See you in the next one, whether that be this week or next week.